Okay. All right. Hello. My name is Juan, and I'll be presenting today on nativism. All right. So, who developed nativism? So, the modern theory of nativism in language acquisition was developed by Noam Chomsky in the 1950s and 1960s. Chomsky argued that humans are born with an innate ability to learn language. He introduced the concept of language acquisition device, LAD, a mental structure that allows children to naturally generate and understand grammatical sentences. Later scholars, such as Steven Pinker in The Language Instinct, expanded on Chomsky's ideas, describing language as a biological instinct rather than a learned behavior. So, this idea has been around for quite a bit since it has been developed. uh, you know, 67, almost 70 years now that has been developed. And it has also been expanded on by multiple people throughout the years, such as Steven Pinker. Oh, okay. Origin of it. So the roots of nativism go back to ancient philosophy. Thinkers like Plato and Rene Descartes believed that some forms of knowledge are inborn rather than acquired through experience. Chomsky revived this idea in modern psychology and linguistics by challenging the behaviorist view, which claimed that language is learned solely through imitation and reinforcement. So as you can see, the origin of nativism isn't just plain simple like many others. This is an idea that was um, radical in a sense because it went against the normal claims of back in the day. Saying that, oh, instead of, just being able to reinforce this through repeated an effort, it was more of a biological in which, meaning that it was more a natural process that you just had to let flow and, let it happen by itself or just, nurture it in a way that wasn't too unnatural, I guess, for it. Now, here's a quick summary of what nativism is. Nativism holds that language learning is an innate biological process, as we said before. According to this view, children are predisposed to acquire language because their brains are hardwired with universal grammatical principles. This explains why although typically developing children learn to speak complex languages quickly and with little direct instruction, even when the linguistic input they receive is incomplete. Now, this is very complicated, so what does all this mean? So this means that humans are naturally predisposed to learning languages, meaning that even as a child, they are wired to understand things that they normally wouldn't understand at that age. That's why a lot of kids, when they're younger, have easier time picking up languages compared to the later stages of adulthood when it is harder to learn new languages, which is why I recommend it for students to or kids to expand their languages when they're little. Um, because at that age, it's just easier, simpler, and just more convenient since they will learn it at a quicker pace. Now, how do we apply this? So applying nativism principles in any education means recognizing and supporting children's natural ability, as we mentioned. The younger they are, the easier it is for them to pick up on new languages, especially complex, since our brains are naturally more, uh, in general, just built for any type of language that we create. Teachers can create environments rich in language exposure. So having, classrooms with a lot of decorations that aren't necessarily English, having different languages displayed in the classroom, especially if they're similar, English and Spanish, having different posters with that each have their own, language, might make it easier for people who are trying to learn the other language. Some activities that teachers can do to help this are conversation, storytelling, and reading, meaning giving students the opportunity to experience other languages. And again, we don't want them to try to memorize anything or just, reread the same things over and over again, which is why conversation is and storytelling are a better um, thing for students, since that way they can come up with new things every single time. A story, you can tell many different stories a lot of times, and the same way, conversations are never the same. You never have the same conversation twice. So every time you're having a conversation with someone, it's always new. And this just helps build that understanding of a new language to students. Educators should trust children's innate linguistic creativity, allowing them to explore and use language freely while providing meaningful input and feedback. Meaning that while, conversing or having students tell a story, provide feedback for them on how they can improve and let them explore more words every time. Ask them to expand on things rather than reuse old material. Ask them to try new words every time, words that they might not normally use and that they might, think is a good for their story. Now, this supports natural language development, particularly in early childhood education and second language learning, where opportunities to engage with authentic community language uses are most effective. So, if you want to teach a kid a new language, have them speak with someone who already speaks that said language. Have them experience it firsthand what it is like to speak another language. Um, Speaking with someone who's already fluent in that language might help them pick it up faster rather than just reading from a textbook or learning from someone who's also learning at the same time. They might all benefit from this. Okay. Okay, now we have the activity for this nativism that I chose is a picture story. Might not be the best, but I think it's really good for this since not only we're looking at images, so instead of just reading a paragraph or passage, we're looking at something that needs for you to describe it. It needs for you to be able to use context clues. Uh, so we're gonna look at a bunch of pictures, and after we get a good look at each picture, we're going to discuss the picture with our partners or students sitting next to each other. We're then gonna summarize the picture with our partners, and at the end we're gonna summarize all of them little by little. So I'm after going through all pictures, we're gonna go back to the first one, summarize it as a group, and then we're going to put it together in a sense. All right. For each picture, I'm gonna show it on screen for about 30-45 seconds, and then we're gonna move to discussion uh, a little bit after. Let me get a timer for 30 seconds. Okay, so this is the first picture. It's not the best quality, so I apologize for that. But here we can see a man who's headed in a direction and seems to be running. Now, discuss this with your group mates. All right, now discuss. Hmm. Hmm. All right. So that was the first picture. Now we've finished discussing, wrapping it up. All right, we're gonna go to the next picture. All right, so again, not the best quality. Apologize for that. All right, but in this case, now we see two men walking. All right. That's like the general. All right. So going for the other pictures to this one, see how you can start, building a connection between the two pictures. See how you can, start making something. Seeing a connection from context clues, talking with your partners. All right. All right. That was 30 seconds. So, oh, sorry. Discussing this. All right. Third picture. And again, I want everyone to, look at these pictures, start talking with their partner, seeing how you can pull things from each, see how you can describe each picture, see if you can tell a story, if there's a story behind them. Try to build something from these pictures. All right. All right. That was 30 seconds. We're gonna move on. All right. Here's the one of the last few pictures. All right. So in this one, as you can see, we have two men shaking hands. They look to be, smiling, happy. Again, try to remember other pictures before, and then we can see what connection we can make to them. See, also, side note that I forgot to mention is none of the guys in these pictures are going to be the same ones. But try to picture them in your head as the same ones, moving from picture to picture, just to, have that consistency. So sorry about that. All right, discuss this with your partners for a second or two. All right, next picture. All right, so in this one, we can see we move to a different scenario again. Same two businessmen who have different tastes. But as we can see, they both have, suits. So that general theme of just two men in suits, talking with one another, conversing maybe. All right, that was 30 seconds. All right, discuss this with your partners for a second or two. All right, oh, sorry. All right. So from those pictures, what can we infer from them? So, and how do these pictures relate to nativism, right? So, nativism again is it's about creating that natural flow of learning, something new, something complex by being able to interact with it. So in these pictures, they're pretty simple, but also complex at the same time because you know what they say, picture tells can tell you can describe a picture with 1,000 words, right? And then 1,000 different ways. So we can describe each of these pictures in a different way, and we can also tell a story with them, right? So in the first picture, we can see that this man is running, right? Um, in some direction, maybe he's in a hurry, maybe he's late. We don't know. But putting things together over time, you see, all right, in this next picture, we have someone who is talking to another man, all right, still in that suit. So assuming that they're both the same man, right? Assuming if they weren't different, we could say, oh, he was maybe running to this man, right? Maybe he was late for a meeting. And he just wanted to, be there as fast as he could. So he wanted to catch up. That's why he was running, right? And then from the next picture, we see, all right, now they're sitting in an office space. Now they're talking. They're looking at something, right? So you can see, oh, you can probably say, all right. So in the first picture, he was running late, right? The second picture, oh, like they're meeting up. The third picture, you can now say, all right, now they're going into their meeting or whatever it is they're talking, maybe making a deal, working for a company, their coworkers, maybe. We don't know. But we can infer that, hey, they were first man was late to something. He was then met with the person who was supposed to be meeting, and now they're talking, right? And now in this picture, oh, now they're shaking hands. Oh, maybe it was a deal. Or maybe they're just, happy to see each other. They're saying goodbye, or they're just introducing each other, right? But they're shaking hands. And what can you infer from people shaking hands? Like, usually when you shake someone's hand, it's very, it's a sign of respect. Uh, it's a common thing, it has a positive vibe to it. So we can agree, and they're also both smiling, so we can see that something good happened with these two men, right? So we can possibly infer that, all right, maybe they were having a business meeting. One of them was running late. They caught up, they had their meeting, and oh, they had a good deal or they made a deal. And now they're shaking on it, right? Which is as most people do when they're making a deal. They're now shaking hands on it, agreeing to a deal, right? And this other picture, all right, now they're having lunch, right? So, a lot of people well, a lot of businesses, they'd have, they like talking things over dinner. So by switching the order of different pictures, we can also say, oh, maybe they met for dinner, for lunch first, and then had their meeting, and then, they signed a deal. Or we could say, oh, they just had such a good meeting, such a good deal that they were like, oh, you know what? Wait, let's have dinner together after this. And then, yeah. So you can mismatch these pictures, put them in different places, and say, all right, there's a story here. And, such so and so happened, then because so and so, and we end it here, right? So how does us building a story, but these pictures have to do anything with nativism? Well, the way I like to look at it is nativism is about giving you something and you being able to expand on it, expanding on something by yourself. Because when I first gave you these pictures, you maybe just looked at these guys just shaking hands, right? That's nothing, it's just something very normal. A lot of people do it. There's nothing much behind it. But once you put other pictures around it, like these two, you can maybe say, all right, maybe they had a deal, they were friends, and now they're having dinner. By putting things together in context with each other, you can expand on something and infer more about it, um, than just by looking at it by itself. And to me, that's the same thing with language. You might hear a word like hello. You might not think much about it, but when you put in the context of, oh, hello there, neighbor, now you can see it, oh, it's my neighbor saying hello. It's a greeting. And now it has a much deeper meaning. So the way I look at nativism is you can look at anything at a surface level, but you can also infer and learn a lot of things about it by putting it together in a context and interacting with it for a long time. A single picture is not a lot of exposure, but multiple pictures is a lot of exposure. So you can learn a lot more from having more than one picture, which will just help you learn about something else. And that's the way it's thing for language. When you're learning a new language, you'd rather be exposed to it rather than just learn what words mean. Because let's say you know how you're trying to speak Japanese, and you know what all words mean. But in Japanese, words are their meanings can change depending on what other words they are paired with. The same thing can be applied with pictures, where you may know the meaning of this one specific image, you may know what's happening here, but the minute you paired with other pictures, its meaning might completely change. All right. Which is why I think this is a great way to introduce you guys to being able to look for past just the face value of it, being able to dive into it, explain um, what is happening, how it connects to other parts of it, and overall just learning, getting used to exploring things further than just looking at it face value. All right. All right, so to conclude, today's the activity. In conclusion, nativism reminds us that language learning is not simply taught; it is naturally acquired. By trusting learners' natural ability to acquire language, educators can focus less on rigid grammar and structure and more on meaningful, interactive experiences that allow language to develop organically. Ultimately, applying nativism in education means believing in the learner's potential, recognizing that language is not just a skill to be memorized, but a natural human instinct waiting to unfold. So another way to put this is when you're looking at a picture, like in our activity, you didn't just look at a picture and say, "Oh, that was just two men sitting in a suit." No, like your brain naturally wanted you to like know what was happening. All right, asking yourself, "Oh, why were these two men having lunch together? Could it have been dinner, breakfast?" No, your brain was naturally thinking ahead, trying to understand the full picture. And that's a good thing because that means you're trying to learn it and you're not just memorizing things. Because what if I told you like a week ago, oh, these men are going to be having lunch? And then you look at the pictures like, all right, they were having lunch. That's not, you're not really learning anything. You're just memorizing, which is not the best way to learn. And anyway, that will conclude today's lesson. Thank you. And yeah, have a great time.